Hey everyone, this is Dan Jurek, Scouting Director for the Pacific Northwest with Prep Baseball, bringing you our 2025 3A WIAA Regional Preview. We started off with 20 teams at the 3A level, and now we are down to our top 16 seeds, which will be spread out over 4 regional sites on Saturday, with a winner from each region advancing to the semifinals and ultimately the finals in Yakima next week. We'll go over the top seeds 1 through 16 and look at the different matchups and how things might play out across the weekend, starting with the number 1 overall seed in 3A, the Mount Vernon Bulldogs. No real surprise here for Mount Vernon to lock up the number 1 seed. Coming into the season, there was extremely high expectations for this group. They were the runner-up in the state championship game last year when they unfortunately lost to a loaded West Seattle team, but they brought back a huge number of starters from that roster and entered the season extremely healthy and have stayed that way throughout the course of the year. They have a 21-3 overall record, and they will be hosting this Saturday as that top seed. Offensively, a familiar name that we have to always discuss when you're going into Mount Vernon, and it's Xavier Nyans. He's been the long-standing number 1 player in Washington for the 2025 class since we started coverage. He's a first-round prospect in this upcoming MLB draft, and from wire to wire throughout his prep career has been one of the most consistent and outstanding hitters in not just the state, but arguably in the country as well. He's a very special talent and a rare prospect to come through on the position side, in the Pacific Northwest. We've seen a lot of arms that have been drafted high over the last few years. There's been very few hitters that can kind of match the ceiling, the tools, and the overall upside that Nyans brings. So obviously, any opposing team going into a one-game matchup with him has to be aware of his power, has to be aware of his strike zone discipline. But as you'll see when we talk about more of this Mount Vernon lineup, if your plan is to just walk him, they have plenty of guys that can do damage around Xavier, and they have this year in particular, starting with juniors Baird Brewer, Bodie Webb, especially. Those guys have been pretty outstanding as juniors coming into the season with a ton of experience from last year's team. And then obviously you have seniors like Dylan Jacobs and Moy Lucatero. Again, they've been on this roster for a long time. They've been through the ringer in the playoff setting, and there's not going to be a situation that you can throw this offense in that's probably going to make them uneasy or nervous. They've been through it all together at this point, as well as another junior, Brady Collins, who was another left-handed stick for this lineup. Very balanced between righty and lefty offensively. They've got some speed. They can put the ball in play. They can, advance runners in like a small ball fashion, or they can beat you with doubles. And obviously, Nyans has the potential to change the game every time he comes to the plate with one swing. So it's a really strong, polished, mature lineup, and it's going to be a tough task for any opposing pitcher to keep them held down for long. On the mound, things have looked slightly different for Mount Vernon this year just because Nyans has not pitched as regularly as he did last year. Last year, he was pretty much a staple in the starting rotation with fellow senior Brody Olmstead. This year, we've seen a lot more of Olmstead consistently, and Nyans has kind of crept back into the picture in more of a reliever capacity. But I would expect Olmstead to get the ball pretty early in this regional, and they will give him every opportunity to pitch deep into the game. He's an experienced senior. He's pretty unflappable, low 80s type fastball with a sinker, good curveball, throw strikes, and just very comfortable out there in big spots. Dylan Jacobs has pitched exceptional this season as well. Kind of emerged with a little bit more velocity than we've seen in the past. We had him up to 85, 86 earlier this spring when it was early in the season in the 40s. He's a strike thrower, mixes in a good curveball, and can really get it done. And then there's a few other arms on the other end of the bullpen with Brady Collins or Colin Boone, Asher Snevna as well. Not sure if there's enough innings to go 6 deep in this type of setting, but there's a good assortment of arms for Mount Vernon to dip into should they have a short lease or anything with one of their starters. So would expect Olmstead to be the first guy they turn to, and in a tight situation or game on the line, they're probably going to Nyans to kind of close it out with his, low to mid 90s velocity. So coming into this, they are the number 1 overall seed. They would be a heavy favorite to get back to Yakima and get to the semifinals for the second straight year. This will be a good challenge for them to kind of defend their home turf. Obviously, I'm sure they're up for it. They've been playing together for a long time, and we'll talk about some of the matchups that they might be presented with on Saturday. Facing off against Mount Vernon in the opening round will be the 16th seeded O'Day Fighting Irish. They are coming into the tournament with a 13-12 overall record after having just recently playing their way into state, through the Metro District Tournament. And they're kind of peaking, getting hot at the right time. Few of the pitching rotation pieces are falling into place for them. On Tuesday, they matched up with Central Kitsap, had a big victory in order to proceed further into the tournament. Had a good start from senior Devon Abaga, committed to Seattle U, went 5 strong innings for him. Nolan Barrett, really exciting freshman to keep an eye on, close things out. They had multi-hit games from junior Uriah Stringfield, and then seniors Briggs Ellis and Quincy Brown were pretty impactful offensively as well. Would expect those guys to kind of be the ones responsible for producing a lot of offense on Saturday between Stringfield, Briggs Ellis, Quincy Brown, and then keeping an eye on seniors Jordan Holloway, Devon Abaga, we previously mentioned, and also Rocco Stefanik. Those guys have been in the lineup throughout, and given their experience, what they've kind of been through in the Metro League, they'll be leaned on pretty heavily. Pitching, this is a pretty interesting group, especially for a 16 seed, because they've got some velocity and they have some guys that can do some things on the bump. I would guess they go with a Lincoln Turner Jr., who we saw earlier this spring, was 84-86 with a hard slider. Nolan Barrett, again, will be available in relief. Not sure about Devon for this one on Saturday, given he just pitched on Tuesday. And then another junior arm to keep an eye on would be Gavin Green. Earlier this spring, we had the chance to see O'Day over at Steve Cox, and unfortunately with that field, you can't get a great look at pitchers given the elevation where the press box is. But Gavin Green was a guy from our side profile that definitely jumps a little bit. Really tall, athletic, lengthy type of pitcher, very smooth. He's got some giddy up on the fastball. We're not going to put any numbers out there officially until we can get it on a radar gun, but he's a bit of an X factor coming into this, because if it's a tight game or they get a lead or something crazy happens late, he's a guy you can turn the ball over to, and he's capable of missing some bats. So, they're going to have their work cut out for them facing Mount Vernon up at their place, natural surface. It's a bit of a transition when you're used to playing on turf all the time. So that's going to be an interesting 16 versus 1 matchup, but we've seen O'Day before. We know what their athletes are capable of if they get some confidence going early, and they won't show up with any trepidation or any worry about, who they're matched up against. So it'll be an exciting way to kind of get started at that particular region. Continuing on in this bracket with the 8-9 matchup, we'll start with the 8th-seeded Decatur Gators, who come into this with a 21-4 overall record and the 5th RPI in 3A. So I know they had a couple tough losses in the district tournament and really had to fight and claw their way to a win and in situation to get to the state tournament. But this is a roster that has quite a bit of depth and firepower on offense, and we were pretty high on them during the spring season. It was a pretty tough draw as an 8th seed overall. Offensively, they're led by senior Eric Havali, who hit 400 this year with 5 home runs. Sophomore Tyler Buell and senior Spencer Holloway kind of round out the next offensive performers in the lineup in terms of just total overall hits. But even beyond that, sophomore Cervantes Gatterson has had a really productive year. And then you've got a couple bigger, more physical juniors with Nate Gilmore and Dylan Riano, who both have home run power, extra base hit type power, and can really do some damage with one swing. So top to bottom, this is a pretty physical lineup. They've got speed, they've got some powerful bats, and they've put up pretty big numbers all year. So I know they got tested, recently in that district tournament. We'll see if maybe that presents a little bit more of a sense of urgency for them right away in a elimination type game. But this is a strong lineup, and they're definitely going to be a tough matchup for the 9 seed, who's another squad that we're also really high on. Looking at Decatur's pitching, it's pretty much 3 names towards the top that have accumulated the most innings for them, with, again, senior Hunter Buell, 40 innings and only 44 earned runs, 40 innings, 4 earned runs allowed this spring. Sophomore Tyler Buell has pitched 30 innings this year and done very well. And then also sophomore to keep an eye on, Ethan Flavel, 35 strikeouts and only 18 innings pitched this year. So in a 2-game series where you have to win to advance, those seem like the 3 most logical guys to get a bulk of the work. I'd be really surprised if it went 4 deep in this particular setting. So if they can get a good start from Hunter, we'll kind of see how they piece it together with Tyler and Ethan in those remaining innings. But overall, it's a pretty top-heavy pitching staff that will rely on those three guys. But offensively, if they can get some runs going early, it might really free up that pitching staff to kind of play loose and be aggressive. So they're going to have their work cut out for them with the number 9 seed, and we'll kind of see how North Thurston stacks up as well. Matching up against Decatur will be the 9th seeded North Thurston Rams. They come in with a 17-6 overall record and the 10th RPI in 3A. They've got a good mix here between their offense and their pitching, pretty balanced across the board with some seniors that will lead the way for them on the bump, but a pretty good blend in terms of their offense and who's been producing for them this year. Starting on the hitting side, junior Cole French is having an outstanding year. He's an athletic shortstop, gap-to-gap power. He can really run. He's got bat speed. He's really kind of pieced it together over the last 12 months or so, has shown well at some workouts, and it's carried over into the spring. Senior Jalen Kennedy, committed to Lower Columbia, former Future Game alum, has been outstanding defensively behind the plate as a catcher throughout his entire prep career. He's having a really strong offensive season as well, especially recently. North Thurston had a big win over Enumclaw to advance to state. They faced a powerful arm who we'll talk about later on in this regional. So they're pretty tested as they get into this regional matchup. Rounding out the offense would be a few juniors with Zach Albright, Ethan Schaefer, and David Perez, who are the next guys in line in terms of the hitting and the overall production. On the mound, we would expect Rudy Larson to get the ball in game one. He was exceptional for them in their big win against Enumclaw. He's a Lower Columbia commit, mid-upper 80s with a hard slider, throws a ton of strikes, competes. Experienced. He's not going to get nervous in this type of situation. He's the type of pitcher that you can give the ball to, and he'll deliver you a complete game type of performance. If you get past Rudy Larson, you're looking again at the previously mentioned Ethan Schaefer and then Grady Wright as the guys who provide the most innings after that, with David Perez as that fourth arm in the mix. We'll see how deep they go, whether it's 3 or 4 arms. It's going to depend entirely on the number of games they play. But overall, a really good lineup, a good experienced lineup, some tools on offense, and some experience at the top of the rotation. So between the number 1 seed with Mount Vernon, the 16 seed with O'Day, Decatur with the 8 seed, and now number 9 North Thurston, this is an awesome bracket. It's unfortunate that 3 of these teams are going to go home after Saturday. I think if they were a little bit more spread out, they'd all have viable chances to advance to the semifinals. But as it stands, only one is going to advance. Obviously, with the number 1 seed being there, we would pick Mount Vernon as the favorite. But again, it's baseball. It's a 1-game playoff. A lot of things can happen. I would expect a lot of tense baseball in this particular region with tight games throughout, and regardless of who's matched up with who. So this will be an exciting watch on Saturday for sure. Continuing on with the bracket, we'll take a look at the number 2 seeded Gig Harbor Tides. They come in with a 23-2 overall record, and they're number 1 in RPI. They are a 5th ranked team in the Power 25, and they have had a tremendous season from start to finish here. There's a lot of positives with this roster, starting with their experience on offense primarily as a key driver for them. They're led by a big group of seniors offensively with Cole Krilich, Jace Corley, Wes Benici, Dan Porras, and Ethan Marr primarily in the offense as some of the key contributors. Porras is a guy that brings a ton of power and speed from the left side. He's got loft to his swing. He can leave the yard. He can go backside with power. He can do a lot of things offensively to change a game. Then you have an experienced guy like Wes Benici holding it down in the infield, who's a prototypical blue-collar gamer, stick his face in the dirt, make a winning play regardless of what it requires. It's been a lot of fun to kind of see his growth and development over the last few years, from when he started attending events as a young kid to when he's graduated, and finished out his prep career as a stronger, more physical kid. And he's going to continue his career at Willamette when he does graduate. And also a guy like Ethan Marr, big physical corner infield type, powerful bat, tons of loft in the swing. There's a couple guys that can change the game for them in one swing, and then there's a couple, scrappier, more blue-collar type of guys in the lineup as well. A couple juniors to keep an eye on would be Grayson Riley and then Hunter Payne. So a lot of depth here. They come at you with a lot of different pieces. They're not overly reliant on 1 or 2 big bats, and they can do a multitude of things on offense to kind of keep the wheels moving for everybody. On the pitching side of things, it's a little bit of a different story as they're reliant heavily on their junior class, specifically ace Quentin Backhorn, who has been phenomenal for them down the stretch. Hard throwing righty, mid to upper 80s, can spin a secondary, competes in the zone, has a ton of poise, ton of composure out there. We've seen him pitch really well this spring. And then they can turn it over to guys like Jake Kuda or Logan Peterson, who are 2 and 3 in terms of innings accumulated for them this spring. If they go 4 deep, you're looking at a guy like Nathan Cheek to come in and kind of provide some relief. So not a ton of overpowering arms on the staff. Backward can bring it a little bit, but overall, outside of him, they're going to kind of pitch, spin their secondaries, and there's not a huge collection of guys they're going to turn to. So it'll be really crucial for those 3 to 4 guys to be sharp. We'll see how many get their name called in a smaller 2-game, max type setting. But with Backhorn at the top, they've got a chance to really kind of make some noise here early because he's going to be really tough for anyone to beat. And then offensively, they can kind of carry the rest of the roster in a second game type of matchup when they might be facing, someone's second or third arm. So they're going to be the favorites in this bracket by a pretty wide margin. Similar to 4A, I think there's a pretty big gap between the top 2 teams in each bracket. So whether it's Mount Vernon or whether it's Gig Harbor, I think they've kind of separated quite a bit from the pack in terms of the competition within their own level. Matching up with Gig Harbor for this one will be the 15th seeded West Seattle Wildcats, who advanced on Tuesday after knocking off the 18th seed University Titans. So West Seattle comes in after doing well enough in the Metro District tournament to punch a ticket to state. They had an opening round game on Tuesday. They won and advanced, and now they have the tough task of dealing with the number 2 seed Gig Harbor Tides. However, West Seattle is no stranger to the playoffs. They've been to the state semis plenty of times in our coverage over the last few years. Not to mention, they are the defending 3A state champs. Now, they lost a ton of key contributors from that state championship team, but there's a couple key pieces that remain. And just overall, the vibe and the energy from the dugout kind of gives those playoff vibes that we're kind of used to seeing with West Seattle when they take the field. So offensively, there's a lot of depth here and there's some speed. It all kind of works and anchors around powerful senior Lucas Chia, who has been on a tear lately. Offensively, he can do pretty much everything at the dish. He can pull, he can get to his power, he can go oppo middle if he needs to shorten up and protect. He's extremely mature, polished hitter, understands what he's doing at the plate. And if he's dialed in, everyone else just kind of takes their game to the next level when he can kind of support the offense. So some of the speedier guys around him would be like Cody Bierling, Dex Puddock, Clay Pecor, guys that can kind of play some small ball, use the backside, bump for hit and run, keep the defense moving. Sophomore Cole Williamson has been pretty impressive on the looks we've had as of late. Then you've got a couple juniors like Lincoln Scott and Sasha Ninberg, who have been swinging it really well. So this is a deeper offensive team than maybe we've seen from the past. Not as much star power on the mound. We'll get into that in a little bit. But offensively, they're really strong. They got a good signal caller behind the dish in Cody Sazama, who really controls the game and can catch and throw with the best of them in the senior class. So this is a good balanced lineup, and they're going to be formidable regardless of what types of arm they face. On the mound, they're probably going to give the ball to junior Jake McCall, who has really taken that next step this year. Early on in his career, there were so many arms coming through West Seattle with Felix Schleid, Miles Gostola, Matthew Henning was pitching a lot, and then you had Miles Chandler last year. There hasn't really been a ton of opportunities for other guys to really get out there. McCall has taken that next step this year. He's been a viable ace for them, and he's got the chance to put together another strong appearance here. So beyond him, there's really 2 main guys with Seth Ruttman and Oliver Hetzel. They're going to be asked to get some crucial outs. I don't really think it's going to go much deeper than 3 arms from West Seattle if they're going to advance here. So look for those 3 guys to carry most of the responsibility, with McCall kind of being leaned on heavily to give them that big start they're going to need in order to potentially knock off a number 2 seed. Continuing in this regional with the 7-seeded Inglemore Vikings, they're coming in with a 16-6 overall record and the ninth highest RPI. Pretty unique pitching staff, which seems to be a strength of theirs from this past season. They've got 4 arms that have accumulated 30 or more innings. We haven't really seen it distributed that way on any other staffs. So outside of these 4, there's only like 5 more total innings that have been pitched on the staff. At the top, you've got Levi Stark and Cooper Richter that have 40 and 39 innings each for each guy. And then Henry Kreskin and Brody Ledger are both above 30 as well. So going into a regional, 2 games max, I would assume you're probably giving it to Stark or Richter to give you that game 1 nod. We'll see how it kind of splits up from there. But it looks like those 4 guys who have been relied on this whole spring will continue to get a majority of the opportunity going into this particular regional. Offensively, although nothing really jumps off the page with this particular lineup, they do have some depth and they do have some balance. And I will say they do have a great walk to strikeout ratio that they've accumulated as a full lineup throughout the course of the year. So definitely more of a patient approach. They have some strike zone discipline. They're not going outside of the zone to try to do something that doesn't make a lot of sense. So this is a more mature offense that's probably going to force opposing pitchers to really attack them, come into the zone. And if they do, they're going to have a couple key bats in this lineup that will capitalize on some mistakes. We talked about Cooper Richter earlier. He's been their top hitter this year in terms of overall hits, as well as with his power with 7 doubles. And then you've got guys like Connor Dowell, Ben Barnes, Jeff Meyer, and Ben Copps, who kind of round out the top half of that lineup. All of them pretty similar in terms of numbers, all 10 plus RBIs, a couple doubles here and there. Again, nothing that really jumps off the page with a lot of slugging or home runs, but all good walk to strikeout ratios. These guys put the ball in play, and they're going to force a defense to get things done behind them. So pretty mature team. I think that they come into a regional with a ton of confidence after doing well in their district tournament. They played in a tough Kinco League leading into this state tournament. So they are a tough out in the 7-seed spot for this particular region, and they'll be matched up with the 10th seeded Capital Cougars. Finishing up this regional with the 10th seeded Capital Cougars. They are coming in with a 15-8 overall record here. Offensively, there's a couple key names that we've kind of seen throughout the course of the spring that have emerged. And the same thing can be said about their pitching as well, where there's, slightly less depth. But offensively, Jacob Mensch in the middle of the lineup provides a ton of left-handed pop. He's experienced. He's a disciplined hitter, can drive the ball to all fields, gap-to-gap power, can definitely lift to his pull side, and he's able to handle some velocity and adjust to spin. Just a really mature hitter for them overall. Guys like Gavin Doyle and Lucas Redmond have been towards the top of the lineup throughout the course of the spring season. Lucas Peterson has battled some injuries on and off throughout his prep career, but he's a big physical bat that can do some damage if he gets opportunities or runners on base or anything like that where he has the opportunity to change things with one swing. Then you got a guy like Brooks Barker, who's a toolsy, athletic sophomore, younger player, still kind of, getting acclimated to a full season here. And he's got a lot of upside, a lot of speed, a lot of bat speed. He can get some things going. And if he was to get hot at the right time, he could definitely change things for this offense. So we'll see how they do, against some better, more advanced arms. Obviously, that's always a tough test for any team. But there's a good balance of experience here and some right-handedness versus left-handedness that gives Capital a chance. On the mound, not a ton of arms that we would probably see in a 2-game stint here. Lucas Redmond is their ace and their number 1. He's going to do the majority of the pitching, I would guess, throughout game 1. We'll see how deep he can go. We had him in the mid-80s, touching upper 80s this spring. Lower arm slot, good live fastball, tough breaking ball. Chase Waters and Parker Vandiver are some other names to watch as some guys that could come into a big spot, potentially pitch out of a jam or get a start in game 2, as well as the previously mentioned Jacob Mensch from the left side, competitive kid. Definitely not primarily a pitcher, but he's gotten some big outs throughout the course of his prep career, and he's a competitor, so he's not afraid to get in there and, attack the ball and put it in someone's kitchen. So 3 to 4 arms that you would definitely have to watch for Capital throughout the course of this regional. With the 2-seed Gig Harbor Tides hosting, they're a pretty heavy favorite to advance just based on the matchups and how things kind of play out. But given who all of these teams can start in a game one, with everyone having an ace and a number one on their staff, always makes for a tense environment. You could have a lot of games where things are scoreless into the fourth and fifth inning, and then you kind of see who will bend but not break, and who will deliver that big hit when the offense is really kind of, hurting to get any momentum going. So a lot of cool matchups here, a lot of good storylines. This is another exciting regional, and really looking forward to how this plays out on Saturday. Looking at the Kennewick Regional, hosted by the third-seeded Kennewick Lions, they come in with an 18-4 overall record and the third best RPI in 3A. Those four losses have all been to teams featured in the Power 25 at some point, with one loss against Central Valley, two losses against Richland, and then one more recently against Kamiakin. So just in terms of the schedule itself, they've played some really talented ball clubs, a bunch of teams that have advanced to the state tournament, and they've done exceptionally well throughout that schedule. Offensively, they have fewer seniors than kind of what we're accustomed to seeing from Kennewick. Last year, they were a bit of an older squad. Previously, we have seen them advance to the semifinals before, when they were led by Danny Dickinson, who's currently starting at LSU. This year, it's a little bit more of like a youth movement for them based on what we've historically seen, with two key seniors in the middle of the diamond with Dane and Dirk Chavez. Dane is a all-league player of the year type guy, Washington State commit, exceptionally talented left-handed bat, athletic defender. He can really do it all. Dirks holds it down towards the bottom of that lineup, but not in the sense of like a typical 9-hitter, because his numbers, his stats, and his productivity really outshine that spot. And he's really more of a second leadoff for them. And then littered throughout the lineup is a big presence of junior bats, primarily outfielder, left-handed pitcher Dylan Mamaya. He's a guy we've seen a multitude of times throughout the course of his prep career, at the future games, during the high school season, at different events such as state games as well. Dynamic, athletic, strong, fast, twitchy. He's a difference maker out there. In addition to Dylan, you've got guys like Trace Teagle, Dom Driver, who have been exceptional throughout the course of the year as well. And one more additional junior for this squad has been Bradley Parker, who's been a consistent offensive contributor as well. Looking at the pitching, again, pretty young across the board. Trace Teagle has started a lot for them down the stretch. Would imagine he gets the ball early in this one. And then they mentioned Dylan Mamaya before for his offense, but he's a highly effective left-handed pitcher as well. And then you're looking at some guys like Samuel Crowther, and then Dane Chavez has pitched not as much, but he is giving them some pretty short relief appearances in key spots. So between Trace Teague, Dylan Mamaya, Samuel Crowther, and then Dane Chavez in a pinch, those seem like the main guys they would use on the mound. And their defense, their team offensive approach, everything they kind of do collectively as a unit is really what provides the strength for this roster moving forward. And they will be a tough opponent to kind of knock out in this regional format. Matching up against Kennewick will be the 14th seeded Snohomish Panthers. They faced off against 19 seed Bellevue on Tuesday and won 6-2 to advance into Saturday's regional. Tyler Vordenbruggen got the start for Snohomish on Tuesday and went pretty deep into that one to help propel them to a win. Not sure if he'll still be available pitch count wise, so I would look for Snohomish to probably go with Luke Davis to get the ball in this opening game on Saturday. 6'4", 6'5", right-handed pitcher, steep angle to the fastball, throws downhill, has some shape to a breaking ball. Braden Holscher would be another arm to kind of keep an eye on, as well, as he's third on the team in innings accumulated. So between those, trio of guys, would expect that they're relied on the heaviest in this particular bracket. Offensively, Landon Klein is the key piece here. A super athletic sophomore. He can run. He hits for power. He's phenomenal defensively behind the plate. He's had an outstanding season this year with batting average, well over 400. Look for him to kind of be the catalyst for these guys for this upcoming matchup. And he is surrounded by Reeve LaRue, Chase Clark, and Luke Davis as the other key pieces to the lineup in terms of their offensive production. So it's a tough matchup, facing the 3 seed, but this is a squad that is pretty blue collar. They play with grit. They have a tough schedule throughout the course of the year. They play on a natural surface, which can be an advantage when it gets to the postseason. So they won't be timid. They won't be nervous about any matchup that would be coming their way. So look for Snohomish to really put up a fight here and make some noise in this regional. Continuing in this regional with the 11th seeded Enumclaw Hornets, they come in with an 18-5 record and the 6th RPI for 3A. So the seeding is a bit of a surprise, but I guess that's just how kind of things shake out sometimes. They really had to battle through districts in order to secure that win and get in victory. That being said, they're pretty battle tested. They had some pretty big matchups throughout the course of the spring, and they will come into this 3A bracket with a ton of experience from last year when they competed in 2A and made a deep run into the state tournament as well. So for them, it really kind of starts at the top with their pitching. Senior Cooper Markham, Oregon commit, has been one of the more dominant arms in the entire state for this season. He's just got video game numbers at this point with 50 innings and over 100 strikeouts. He's been very difficult to square up, even more difficult to score against. We saw him, late in the spring in a good matchup against North Thurston. Although he did not end up on the winning side of things, he was still 90 to 95 with a hard slider. And regardless of who you're facing or what the situation is, anytime you can roll out that type of arm in a high school game, you have a good chance to advance, and he has a good chance to throw a complete game. So if that's the case, and Cooper gives him 6 or 7 innings, you're looking at Oliver Potts, Carter Grant, and Paxton Patterson to kind of pick up the remaining work, whether it's just one game or they ultimately advance and have another 7 innings to account for. Those 4 arms seem like they're going to get it done. And with Cooper kind of leading the way, they have a really good shot to advance to that winner's bracket in this particular region. Offensively, Graham Wagner, Eli Murphy, we mentioned Cooper Markham as well, Landon Wall, and Cole Chechki are the primary drivers of this offense. Not a ton of power, not a ton of slugging, more so just some key situational hitting and a more well-rounded top to bottom offensive type of approach. So if they do score runs and they're getting pitching, obviously that's going to make any team tough to beat. But for Enumclaw especially, because they've pitched so well this year, I think if they could kind of score early, get a little bit of momentum going on the offensive side first, it really sets them up for success in this regional. And as we've talked about with other teams, if you're going to get a CG in game 1 and you have the rest of your staff to navigate 7 innings, it's going to be really tough to knock a team off like that if they're riding high after a big victory in that opening round. Matching up against Enumclaw will be the Stanwood Spartans, who have an 18-5 record and the 7th best RPI in 3A coming into it. This is a older, more experienced roster. We had the chance to see them match up against a good Montlake Terrace team earlier this spring, and it really kind of showed their style play and how they approach the game. On the mound, they're led by junior Tanner Requa, who has over 50 innings on the year, really good walk to strikeout ratio. He's definitely their ace moving forward into a setting like this. Would be the safe pick to get the ball in game 1. And then they'll look to Gavin Gehrman or Cullen Maloney to kind of make up for the remaining innings, depending on, what they get out of Tanner in this particular matchup. So obviously on paper, it looks like they're going to face, Cooper Markham in game 1. So knowing that going into this, their pitching staff is going to be pretty dialed in. Obviously, they know they won't have a ton of room for error. That can kind of elevate the performance and the execution in some settings. And, for a team like Stanwood, who is pretty battle-tested, blue-collar, hard-nosed type of approach to the game, I think they'll definitely be up to the challenge. On the offensive side of things, the 2 guys we had previously mentioned, Tanner Requa and Gavin Gehrman, actually lead the way in terms of total hits for this offense, with Luke Brennan being another senior in the lineup to kind of keep an eye on. Statistically, nothing jumps out in terms of slugging or stolen bases or power or anything of that nature, but really high on base percentage as a team, very close 1-to-1 walk to strikeout ratio, and these guys aren't shy about taking their HBPs. So they're going to look to get on base. They're going to look to keep things simple. I don't think they get too aggressive trying to split gaps or, get big on 2-0 fastballs. So this will be a concentrated, cohesive approach offensively, and then we'll see what happens when they potentially get some traffic on the bases or runners in scoring position. They can get those clutch, timely hits to put up a crooked number. They're going to be a tough out. It's a really intriguing 11-6 matchup between these 2 squads. and that pairs well with, I think, what we'll see from the 3-14 matchup with Kennewick and Snohomish. This regional feels pretty wide open. Obviously, the number 3 seeded Kennewick Lions would be the favorite going into it. But given how these other rosters break down, where their strengths are, the type of pitching that it's going to take to get through this, this is a regional where I wouldn't be shocked if things or seeding or favorites kind of throw that all out the window. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a chalk type of regional. Again, we'll find out on Saturday, but I think there's a lot of really intriguing pieces here that make for some interesting baseball matchups. Finishing up the 3A bracket with the 4th seeded Ballard Beavers hosting their regional after going 18-6 and grabbing the 4th best RPI in 3A. On the mound, they're led by Dylan Walblom and Aiden DePaula as their de facto 1 and 2. They've been pretty consistent throughout the course of the season, accumulating a lot of innings, pitching deep into games, and being very effective. Both of them also help offensively as two-way players. In terms of pitching, if they do need some additional relief beyond those guys, Fisher Witt, Truett Madonna, and Bennett Klein have provided a good chunk of relief innings throughout the course of the year. But look for Walblom or DePaula to get the ball in game 1. And then presumably, should they advance, the next guy would be the game 2 type starter. And they've got some more experienced type of arms to kind of guide them through this, 2-game bracket. Offensively, we talked about Walblom and DePaula. For whatever reason, every time we've seen Aiden DePaula play this spring, he's ended up hitting a home run. So he's a bat that can do a few things with his offensive pop. Obviously, we know of Truett Madonna, UCLA commit, physical, athletic. He's a very good defensive catcher, and he's arguably one of the best hitters in the state. He's had a tremendous year, batting over 400 for the Beavers, and he is a game changer on offense. If you're too careful with him, he has no issues swiping bags, making things happen, and the guys hitting behind him have provided a lot of support throughout the course of the year. So they're strong up the middle as well defensively with guys like Fisher Witt, Danny DeMarco, balancing out the rest of that middle of the diamond with Truett as well. So look for those guys to make an impact on offense with their speed in addition to their defense. And then you've got contributions from Miles Soja and Brady Mialovich on the offensive side of things as well to give Ballard some offensive depth, pretty balanced lineup, different pieces that can hurt you with speed and then some with power. So they put together a pretty complete season from start to finish. They're hosting for a reason. This is a very talented squad. And as a 4 seed, they are pretty heavy favorites to advance, through this regional and make it to semis. The 13th seeded Shorewood Storm Rays will match up with Ballard in that opening round game. They advance to Saturday after beating 20 seed Ridgeline on Tuesday. We were on hand for that particular contest. It was a dreary, wet, standard Pacific Northwest day, and Shorewood got it done to keep their season alive. So they do bring a little bit of experience, a little bit more of a battle-tested type of vibe into Saturday. There's 4 main bats you got to watch with this particular lineup, 3 out of them being left-handed. So Jamison Connolly Sr. kind of leads the way. Then you've got Kanata Barber and Lorenzo Yaramillo on the left side of things. Both of those guys have tremendous bat speed, ability to drive the ball, stay in the middle of the field, and they can run as well. And then senior Joey Facilla up the middle plays really good defensive center field, and he's one of the bigger contributors for them on the bump as well. So with Connolly going on Tuesday, not sure where his pitch count might have been at specifically. Think he's probably available for a good chunk of innings on Saturday as well. So he could get the nod in game 1. It could be Facilla. We've seen Finn Licchio get the ball as well for Shorewood. And then some other guys out of the pen would be potentially be like Danny Morgan or Reed Oliveto for these guys. So a little bit top heavy in terms of who contributes the most innings for them on the mound. And we'll see how deep it gets in the bullpen and how many guys they eventually turn to. So it's a tough matchup against Ballard, but again, this is a team and a roster that had to be tested early in order to get to Saturday. So I would expect them to come in with a ton of confidence and ready to compete right away. Continuing on with this bracket with the 5th seeded Peninsula Seahawks at 16-7, coming in with some momentum after winning the championship of their district tournament prior to state. On the mound, they are led by John Brown and Caleb Copeland primarily, with Daniel Sleeter and Pete Brown giving some relief innings for them as of late. But with the top of the rotation, expect John to kind of get the ball early in this one, or potentially Caleb could go one of two ways with either of those guys. But down the stretch, those guys were giving them the biggest starts. So we'd expect them to get the ball early and then rely on those additional arms with Sleeter and Browand to kind of round out the bullpen and give any relief appearances that they might need over the course of 1 to 2 games. Offensively, there's quite a bit of depth here with some young guys and then some older guys contributing. It's a pretty balanced lineup. You've got, some experience at the top with Isaac Schultz Tate and Kainoa Coit. Pete Brown kind of stays in the middle in that 3-hole as a sophomore and has had a pretty solid season so far throughout the course of the year with a little bit more power production as of late. Then you've got some guys like a Jonathan Vergara Dykes and Michael Tellez who have been contributors throughout the year as well. So top to bottom, there's some good depth here. Nothing really jumps out as overpowering or explosive offensively, but just a good cohesive group that has really no weaknesses across the board. So whatever part of the lineup kind of comes into a key spot over the course of a game with runners on base or a big moment, there's a lot of guys that they can rely on to deliver that clutch hit. And that's what, you would expect them to do in this situation. So as a 5 seed, there's a good chance that this is a type of squad that advances to that regional championship. They do have a tough matchup with the 12 seed, which we'll get into in a second here. But overall, there's some strength in this roster, and they're going to be a difficult matchup. Matching up against Peninsula, we will get into the 12th seeded Eastside Catholic Crusaders. The EC crew comes in after doing enough damage in the Metro tournament to advance to state. They've had a bit of an up and down season. They've had some really big wins, a couple difficult losses, and it's really kind of revolved around finding their rhythm on the pitching mound specifically. Their number one starter and ace, Will Crane, has battled some, arm things here and there throughout the course of the spring. Seems like he's finally clicking on all cylinders now and is fully healthy for a bit of a playoff run. Expect him to get the ball early here. Velocity-wise, he's been in the upper 80s, touching 90, has a hard slider, very athletic guy. He's a two-way prospect for them as well, has the ability to do some damage, get on the bases, run. So he's a pretty dynamic player for them. And then should they get to a second game or need a extended outing, Tristan Wagum is the guy who has been picking up a bulk of the innings in addition to Crane. He's been a dependable number 2 starter for them throughout the course of the spring. And he's a really level-headed, even keel type of arm. And then Jay Baxter is a guy that we've seen across a couple different looks, a little bit more high octane. He's got more swing and miss stuff. He's got some velocity. If the command and everything is clicking right, he can miss bats and be a really effective bullpen arm for these guys in a tight situation. So not a ton of depth that they're going to throw at you on the bump here, but they've got, some key guys at the top that if they get hot and they get rolling, can rattle off 6 or 7 innings for you. Offensively, this is pretty young squad. There's not a huge presence of seniors. Obviously, we talked about Crane, and then you've got guys like Micah Bartle and Zach Seeger in the lineup to kind of bring some more experience to this particular matchup and to a playoff setting. This is a group that starts 3 freshmen with Hudson Schott, Kobe Reese, and Tyler Long. All 3 of those guys have done admirably in their freshman campaigns. But, when you're young, it's going to be a bit of a learning curve. So by now, those guys are a little bit more experienced. They're a little bit more seasoned, and I would expect them to have a little bit more confidence coming into a playoff setting, given the competitive baseball they've had to play so far this year. And then in addition, you've got some more bats like a Kai Jambor or Ryan Long, both juniors, both kind of catch or DH, depending on what the other's doing. Kai plays a little first base as well. Those guys can add pop. They can use the middle of the field. They can really get things going. Against a good arm or in a tight situation when things are kind of scoreless and you're looking for someone to get it going, you can kind of lean on this junior class a little bit for EC with like Ryan Long and Kai Jambor, and then Bartle, especially as a senior, kind of leading the charge. So a lot of athleticism with this group, a lot of upside. They've had some, tough losses here and there, but they've also had some big wins. So depending on early momentum and how things start out for them, this is a group that can get hot and ride that confidence through, 2 strong games. With the 4-5 matchup, and then with the other higher seeds here, this is a highly competitive regional. I would think Ballard probably has the fast track to advance to semis in Yakima. But again, You're going to face good arms regardless of who you're up against. And in these one-game playoffs, a lot of things can happen quickly. So really diverse group here for this particular set of games, and we're looking forward to see who kind of gets hot at the right time. So that wraps up our Rain Delay podcast covering the 3A WIAA state tournament. For regional coverage, please stay tuned to Prep Baseball Washington on social media throughout Saturday, and be sure to like, subscribe, and share to our YouTube channel specifically as you look to build this out and create more content moving forward. So thank you again for tuning in, and good luck to everyone this upcoming weekend.